Hello, Out Bosses. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to this week's episode of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. Before jumping into the show, I wanted to extend a virtual invitation to our weekly office hours. They take place every Friday at 2:30 Pacific time. So we've opened up our office hours to all LGBTQ plus business owners, our Outboss family, who may be looking for support right now during COVID-19. So if you need some extra inspiration, if you're looking for guidance on how to grow your business, how to keep your business going during these very, very challenging times, go ahead to outentrepreneur.com for some details on how to register, and I'd love to see you there. So on this week's episode, I am super, super excited to introduce you all to Elena Joy Thurston. So Elena is an inspirational speaker and founder of Pride and Joy Foundation. She grew up in a turbulent home, joined a conservative church as a teenager, put herself through college, married and birthed 4 beautiful children, and then Life 2.0 brought a divorce, leaving/getting kicked out of her church, a beautiful love story, and a successful new career. Her viral TEDx talk has paved the way for speaking engagements around the country, and we are so thrilled to have her on the show today. So without further ado, Elena, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
this is amazing.
Yeah. This is definitely a highlight of my week for sure. And I'm just really excited to connect with you and to learn a little bit more about your story. And I love your bio. You know, it definitely is a teaser to really kind of dig into some of your lived experiences and how that shaped what you do in the world. And I think just starting there, you know, could you just tell us a little bit more about your business and what makes it unique?
Absolutely. So I started this business just a few years ago, and it came out of necessity because when I came out, I was a very devout member of a very conservative religious community. And when I came, my business, I had been a portrait photographer for 10 years, and I was doing very well. And 80% of my clients came from this community. So when I came out, I lost my business. And not only that, but I was getting a divorce and needed to be financially independent. And so I went through a time of trying to find like the most stable income I could possibly find. And so I figured that would be healthcare. Everyone's going to get sick and die. So that was where I should go. And so I spent a good 6 months figuring out which program I wanted to do, applying to a program, getting into a program. And then I very quickly realized that that was not my path. My body and I have now become very reconnected compared to the first 37 years of my life. Mm-hmm. And now my body really communicates clearly and effectively what I should not be doing. And yes. Pursuing that career in healthcare was not what I should be doing. And when I finally woke up and realized that, I had been listening to a lot of podcasts, reading a lot of self-growth books, trying to literally reconnect with who I was and who I was becoming in this part of my life, Life 2.0, as you read in the bio. And I realized I have this story, and every time I tell it, it affects people, whether they're straight, whether they're LGBTQ, whether they are Mormon or not Mormon. There are elements of this story that really resonate with people and affect people. And I started sharing it more and more, and then realized this really is what I need to do. There are kids out there, there are adults out there that need to know they are not alone in these crazy circumstances. And part of my story is that going through conversion therapy statistically has a very high rate of suicide. And I had gotten to that point where I had suicidal ideations and had to be treated for that. And I had this massive revelation that, okay, there are kids out there going through conversion therapy. I mean, to remind you, like, I had spent the last 20 plus years as a Mormon and just had no idea that conversion therapy even existed until I went through it, ended up where I did, and then realized there are children there are other adults that have no idea how painful this can be, and that their very lives are at stake, and that their parents probably don't understand that their lives are at stake, and their spouses probably don't understand that. I know my spouse did not at the time. So it became this driving factor as I was contemplating, right? Like, how am I going to support myself? How am I going to support my 4 kids? It became this driving factor of, I need to let the world know what this is really like. And I can come from kind of a unique space because I was that devout conservative Mormon for decades. And so I can speak to that population. I can put it in words and in phrases that they can understand, and that it doesn't feel other to them or foreign to them. It feels like, oh, this is the soccer mom down the street, and this is what this program did to her, and it's legal in our state, and people are making thousands of dollars off of this. This is not okay. So I realized I had a great opportunity, and so I started just in speaking with government organizations, city municipalities and states that were considering bans on conversion therapy. And then I realized if I really wanted to have some validity and reach people, not just governments, but people where they are, then I needed some, like I said, validity. So I went and was able to get on the TEDx stage, and then life just kind of blew up from there.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That is like I mean, it's clear that you're a storyteller. And I mean, I'm standing up actually as I record this. So I really thank you for kind of giving us some of the Cliff Notes versions of how you arrived to where you are today. And, just the piece on one, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your experiences of surviving conversion therapy practices. And I think our audience is pretty well versed in understanding the really, really horrific outcomes that come from that. And, and you're on the other side, healing, and as you're healing, sharing your story with so many people. And I really liked what you said about connecting with other folks who may come from the Mormon church or other audiences. The fact that you see the power of your story because you understand that particular audience, and that audience trusts you because you're coming from the same kind of culture. And I just want to highlight that for our audience. When people, you might be thinking, I have this idea, or I have this story to share, or this book idea in particular, but it's been told before, right? And who am I?
Yes. Oh
and
my gosh. Yes.
So that like imposter syndrome creeps in. And, something I actually heard earlier today is that it's not so much that people are coming to you for the facts of understanding how bad conversion therapy is, right? They are coming to you because they want your synthesis. They want to hear your filter. They want to hear your experiences with it and where you come from. And so I really want, I just want the audience to pick up that key point, because it's so important.
Yes.
Especially, I'm sure, as you are crafting your TEDx and other talks that you do, of just before you test it that first time, the voices in your head are probably like, who are you, or why are you doing this? So what was that like for you? I mean, it sounds like you started sharing this kind of in community, with fellow Mormons and maybe folks who are no longer practicing. And, there's a lot of campaigns in states right now to end these practices. And it's kind of, can't believe that they're still happening in the majority of the country. So talk to me about how you got involved in that kind of advocacy, and, what propelled you to take the stage the first time. What was going on for you to get to that moment?
Yes. I'm going to open this and bookend this with the concept of imposter syndrome, because I think that you touched on something massive. So I had just moved out of my husband's home, and I was trying to figure out again, like, how I was going to support myself and my 4 kids. And someone suggested to me that I read Love Warrior by Glennon Doyle Melton. And I had all this time on my hands, especially when the kids weren't with me. I had to really distract myself. And so I read this book and I read it in one day. And as I'm turning the pages, I'm thinking, this is me. Like, she has put my life on a page, and I've never felt so validated in my entire life. And I'm turning the pages, and it's getting to be like midnight and 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm trying to force myself to go to bed. And so I'm literally sitting on the stairs in my house reading this book, and I finally finish it. And it ends with her and her husband on the beach saying, here I am, like I am here and I'm committed and I'm staying. And I throw the book down and I'm like, what the hell? I thought this was supposed to end better. Like, I was really angry.
Yeah.
And then I immediately got on my phone and Google her because I want to figure out more about her. And I, of course, realized that it's 5, 6, 7 years later, and she's now married to a woman. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yes. And I think that was just the biggest, it was like a launching pad. It was like having a diving board where I could just spring from and launch into this new life. And then it was very easy to have a cause or a purpose. You know, my business coach really preaches, and I really held on to this during this time of quarantine and COVID-19. She preaches that first you have to have your purpose, and then you'll have the passion, and then the people will come because they'll be attracted to the passion. And so it was very quickly and easily, my purpose is to help reduce the risk of suicide for all people, including LGBTQ. And I realized I really needed to speak to that. I needed to be there for that. And in the beginning, it wasn't easy because you start with social media, right? Well, 80% of my social media are Mormons. And at first, they really agree that I think we as a human race can agree that no one should participate in something that has a 57% suicide rate. Or even if you look at the most conservative numbers, you're looking at a 42% suicide rate. Like, that's just too much for anyone, right? And so at first they can really agree with that. But then particularly here in the West, I'm in Arizona, they feel like no government can tell me how to protect my children. Like, I know my child best. And if I think my child needs a specific something for them, the government should not be able to tell me what I can and can't do with that. And so there got to be a lot of drama there. And luckily, I was blessed with this concept that really spoke to them of, okay, I get that. And you do have your parents' rights. However, we as a society, when parents choose not to protect their children, we as a society enact laws to make that happen. It's why we have child seatbelt laws. It's why we have child porn laws. It's why we have child labor laws. Like, we as a society value these children, and we let you parent as much as you can and to the best of your ability up until the point where it might harm the child. Right. And science now tells us this harms the child.
Yes.
So that's been really good and helpful. But then as I got on the TEDx stage, I don't know if I've ever told this story before. I was able to be in the audience with the organization that I was with in Colorado. I was able to be in the audience up until 2 hours before my talk. And then I was required to be backstage. And so up until 2 hours before my talk, I'm in the audience, I'm listening to everyone. I just really wanted to be present. I wanted to be there, soaking it all in and having that energy so that it was real and authentic when I got on stage. And there was a man that gave a talk, and it was a great talk. And he the focus was not homosexuality, but it was definitely a subtext of the talk. And I went into overload, and I immediately went into, okay, well, now I'm just another gay person. Like, now I'm just telling my story, and it's just going to be a repeat, and I don't have anything to bring to the table. And right. So I'm sitting in this audience, like, breaking down, and my girlfriend looks at me and she says, I'll be right back. And she stands up and walks away, and she comes back with TEDx Colorado Springs actually gives you a speaking coach to work with you one-on-one up until the event. And she came back with Jill, who is my speaking coach, and she was like, "Get over here." So I walked out with her, and we go into the foyer, and she's like, "What the hell is going on?" And so I tried to tell her, and she's like, she basically just called me on all the BS, which was amazing. Mm-hmm. And I gave the talk, and it went great. But then even very recently, so Glennon Doyle, who I'm such a fangirl, right? And she's married, her wife is Abby Wambach, who's the celebrity soccer player.
Oh, yeah.
And people often like to compare myself and my girlfriend to them, even though there's not a lot in common there. But whatever, if you're gonna
take
have
it,
boxes,
that's
right?
awesome. Yeah.
Right. And so she just came out with a book, like her follow-up, and it's about her life finding Abby and realizing that this is the love of her life and all of these things. And I've been waiting for this book for months. I knew it was coming out. It's come out during quarantine. And so she had to cancel her entire book tour, and it's been crazy. And I have this book on my side table of my bed, and I can't read it. I cannot pick it up and read it because I'm so scared that I'm going to go down that rabbit hole again of, well, now why should I write my book? Like, I already have a book agent. Like, all they're waiting for is for the proposal and to like, it's going to be published this year. But there's just this massive part of me that says, she's already told the story. You have nothing to add. You have nothing to add. So that would be the final bookend, except that the overarching concept that makes me fight that is that probably 2 to 4 times a week, I am receiving DMs and messages and emails from Mormon women writing to me in the middle of the night in their closet saying, I am trapped. I am in love with my best friend, and I am trapped in this marriage, and I have these children, and I can't leave them.
Yes.
So I will not get into heaven if I do what you did. And so I can't, but I need to keep hearing your voice. And I'm responding to them, and they don't, 100% of them don't even want to talk to me on the phone because they're like, I really want your life, and I can't do it.
Wow.
And those are the women, and I don't know that they're at that point, but the words they use, I'm in a pit. I haven't seen her in 4 months, and I've lost 40 pounds. Like, I don't know how to wake up in the morning. Like, all of those things, I felt those things. And then I know where I ended up. And it scares me that they might be on a path and they don't know where it ends up.
Absolutely.
And right?
Yeah. I mean, it just kind of goes back to what you're saying about, your business coach, channeling your business coach around purpose. And, I guess it goes back to Simon Sinek too. It's like,
right.
That why,
why,
right? It's like, why are you doing what you're doing? And those stories, the people that are reaching out, the women that are reaching out to you, are really, really struggling, and they find you online. They hear your TEDx talk, your website. It's a lifeline. You are a lifeline to so many people, either, with a background in the Mormon church or people who have survived conversion therapy practices. It's so important what you're doing. And it reminds me of a speaker that I know who talks about her message, that she's married her message, not so much the forum, the script, the ways that she gets the message out. It's just so important to her that she dial it in, she rethinks it, comes up with other stories to really get across, what her purpose is. And it's clear that that's what you're doing. And, the book is just another medium for people who, may not have access to a computer, or they don't like the screen time, but they love reading, and it's your audience will continue to grow. And I think that might, you could at least kind of neutralize some of those voices in your head that are kind of like, the imposters that,
right.
that piece, because, honestly, there are so many people that resonate with the experiences that you have, and they probably don't have a lot of media that's out there right now, or maybe there's some folks, right? But there's not enough, I guess, is my point. And it's great to hear you stand in your power, and at the same time struggle with what so many of us as business owners, entrepreneurs, even LGBT folks more broadly, struggle with every day, which is, really being in alignment with your purpose and doing the thing that lights you up. And at the same time, because you're daring to step into the ring, as Brene Brown says, and, Teddy Roosevelt, you're doing it. And of course that will bring up naysayers, right? But, there's no regrets. You're doing everything that you're called to do. And I think that I just really admire your path. And, and I wanted to bring back purpose again to something that you said early on about when you were kind of repurposing. You had mentioned you lost your business, as you're going through the coming out process and in your divorce, and that you went into healthcare and thinking, this is a stable job and good for you and you'll be financially independent, all that good stuff. And that you gained this body awareness of like, something is off and to a point where you had to completely switch gears again. And so I was hoping that you could talk to us a little bit about that moment in your life, about repurposing, because I think for some of us going through this moment of the great pandemic, COVID-19, whatever you want to call it, it's causing a lot of people to either do that first step that you were brave enough to do, to say, my life is not working out and I have to rethink everything. Or it could just be a business thing where it's like you're standing in your purpose, doing what you want to do, but business might look different. So help us, help us get the courage to face this moment by just sharing a little bit of what you did in the past.
Wow. So I guess there's two layers there. And the first layer would be leaving everything. When you're Mormon, especially Mormon in Arizona, Utah, Idaho, certain parts of California, your entire social, political, educational, everything community is of the faith. The neighborhood that I lived in, so Mormon congregations, they're called wards, are actually organized by physical boundaries. And so like an entire neighborhood, that'll be one ward. And then the neighborhood next door, that's another ward, right? And wards are made up of about 300 families. And so if you have less than 300 families in a neighborhood, okay, well, that'll include the neighborhoods next door. And if you have more than 300 families in a neighborhood, as is often the case in the Mormon Belt, then you have more wards in a neighborhood. And I'm telling you this because the neighborhood that I lived in and had lived in for about 8 years when I finally came out, there were 5 wards in a half square mile. So that's like 1,500 Mormons in a half square mile. So everyone I saw in the grocery store, when I went for my runs, at the park, at the bus stop in the morning, like it's everyone. Not to mention the fact that in the Mormon religion, when you are married, you're sealed in the temple. It's not just till death do you part, it's for eternity. You are sealed together for eternity. And you can't get into heaven. You cannot return to God unless you are sealed for eternity. So even if you're a very good person, if you are not married and sealed for eternity, you're not returning to Heavenly Father in the afterlife. So there's some big issues with leaving that, right? So, as well as when you're sealed in the temple, married in the temple, your children are considered sealed to you. The children you have in that marriage are sealed to you, which means that in the afterlife, or if one of your children, heaven forbid, died young, you are told that, well, you're sealed to them. They're going to be with you for eternity. So yeah, you're going to miss them for the rest of this life, but they're going to be with you. You have not lost them unless you do something that, like a divorce, which breaks that ceiling. So the first step was to realize I'm not going to survive if I'm living for heaven. My children will not have a mom if I continue down this path. And that's not okay with me. So once I made that first decision, like, I am willing to not return to God as long as my children can have memories of me growing up. So that was the first decision. And then the second decision was realizing, so my oldest were teenagers at the time. I think they were like 14, 16. And so they were just starting to get interested in girls, and these are my boys. And we were just starting to deal with dating issues and blah, blah, blah. And I realized, holy crap, the relationship of what it means to be man and wife that we have been modeling for these kids is not healthy. I have convinced myself that it's healthy, but they don't get to see like cuddles on the couch. They don't get to see kiss hello and a kiss goodbye and all of these things. And I realized I don't want that for my children. I don't want my boys to have a partner, whether it's male or female, and think that that's how you be a husband.
Yeah.
And I don't want that for their partners. Like, I thought about these future wives, these future daughter-in-laws that I would have, who would not know what it's like to get a hug and a kiss in the morning because they had never been taught that that's what husbands do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was really clear for me. First, it was a matter of survival. And then it was a matter of, this is not healthy for my kids. So I had to take it from like an external standpoint in order to make a huge decision to come out to my community, to file for divorce, and to leave the family home. Like, that was a lot, obviously.
Absolutely.
To pivot.
Yeah. And sorry, just to interrupt, but
Yeah.
this kind of mourning of loss of community, you had mentioned the number of wards that were kind of surrounding you.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say 15,000 people?
Sorry, 1,500.
Well, that's still a lot. It's
still a lot.
Yeah. I mean, that's your connection. That's your everything. And just kind of looking at that cliff of like, what's on the other side of this. So yeah, no.
Right.
So that was like one piece of the pivot. Keep going. I just wanted to.
No. And so then I had to get out. I had to be in a safe space. And I was in my rental, and it was my own home. I got married when I was 20. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is the very first time that I had my own room, my own bathroom. I could leave the tampons out. It was a big deal.
Yeah. It's yours.
It's mine. This is mine. And it was incredible. And it felt so safe. I mean, as anyone who's been in a mixed orientation marriage for a long time knows, like, that bedroom doesn't feel very safe. Mm-hmm. That marriage bed does not feel safe. Like, and so for the very first time to be in a place where I felt completely myself, completely okay, I had incredible experiences at that time. I mean, I had an incredible experience of talking to God on the floor of that bedroom, and knowing without a shadow of a doubt that it was okay with him that I left this religion.
Nice. Yes.
And right. And then, okay, here I am, I'm using my logic brain, and I'm searching in healthcare, and okay, now this entire time I've been in intense therapy, not conversion therapy, but healing therapy. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest things I had to work on was reconnecting with my body, because, well, one, when you're a lesbian living in a marriage with a man, you're going to disconnect from your body real damn quick. Mm-hmm. And that's going to stay that way for as long as that marriage lasts, right? Yeah. But also, number two, when you are Mormon and you go through the temple, you are given, they're called temple garments. And so they're these clothing, underwear essentially, that you wear under your clothes. And you're taught that it's very similar to like a priest's robes.
Mm-hmm.
So it represents your faith, but they're worn under the clothing. And they're also about modesty. So the bottoms of the underwear go down to your knees, and the tops that you wear for women, they come up quite a bit to ensure you don't show any cleavage. And then they also go a few finger widths down the shoulder to make sure you're never wearing anything strapless or too revealing. It's all about modesty, right? And so I had gone through the temple when I was 19 years old. So I had been wearing these garments since I was 19 years old. And you're supposed to always wear them, not when you're swimming, obviously, but that's about the only exception.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I had spent decades literally never seeing my body.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of disconnect that can create is just astronomical. And so a huge part of my therapy was reconnecting with my body. And here I am researching, what is my career going to be? How am I going to pay the bills, healthcare, blah, blah, blah. I got the acceptance letter from the school. I started making the plans on how this was going to work with splitting the kid custody and commuting, blah, 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 blah. And then my body shut down. And I started, first it was like I started sleeping 12 hours a day. And then I was sleeping like 15 hours a day. And by 2 weeks in, I was sleeping like 20 hours a day.
Wow.
I would be awake long enough for my kids to come home from school, do their homework with them, feed them dinner, and then they had to put themselves to bed because I couldn't stay awake that long.
Yeah.
And so here I am thinking, holy crap, like, do I have mono? Do I have something else? Like, what is going on? And so I'm spending a lot of time meditating with myself, grounding. And 3 weeks into it, it just hits me like a ton of bricks. Like, you're not on the right path. This isn't what you're supposed to be doing. And so that was October. So in November, I practiced changing because classes weren't supposed to start until January. And so for November, I kind of did an experiment of, okay, I'm going to let that go and I'm going to pursue another path. What else am I good at? What resources do I have? Literally, the only thing I have is the story. Is the story worth anything? So I started reaching out to different business coaches and this is what I've got. Do you see anything here? And quickly, very quickly, within 24 hours of sending the first email, the response was, there's absolutely something here. There is retreats, there is classes, there is a book, there is a podcast you could host. Like they just like listed it out. And I was like, okay. And then I was sleeping like 6 hours a night because I was so excited and in my passion and in my work and doing what I needed to do. Now, having said that, as much as I love what I do, 2 weeks ago, I had 7 paid public speaking events cancel within 48 hours. Yeah. As I'm sure every public speaker you know went through the same experience, right?
Oh, yes.
Yes. So it's now once again time to do a massive pivot. And again, I'm coming back to my body and doing all the things that I've learned work for me, which is meditation, which is intentional movement, which is a ton of journaling, processing with my therapist. Like I'm going through all the steps. And even then, I am not telling you that was a magic cure. It took me a solid 2 weeks. Like that stuck in bed thing happened again for at least 5 days, but I think that happened to like half the world. So,
yes.
so I feel really
still
normal
maybe.
about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Some days it comes back.
Yes.
And different things. I had reached out to all these speaking engagements saying, okay, so are we going to do something virtually? Are we going to do something online? And everyone is kind of frozen. Mm-hmm. Everyone is just like, I don't even know what life is about. And so the organizers were not able to commit to that. And so I'm like, how am I going to pivot again? How am I going to get this message out there? And luckily, there's this amazing thing of podcasts.
Yeah.
Like it has just, it's been a godsend being able to get this message out there still, and to audiences that are ready and willing and needing to hear it. That has been absolutely incredible. And then collaborating with other people, help it, like basically building each other's audiences at the same time, has been really, really, really great. As well as just taking a beat and realizing, I could have my entire proposal done this month if I really want to.
Oh, yeah.
And then you never know, like quarantine could be done in a month, and then I'll go back to speaking and the proposal will be all done. What I thought would take 6 months is only going to take 1 month because
Yes.
I have all this damn time.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes. I love how you're such a good storyteller of just kind of connecting kind of your life pivot with the business pivot right now in this moment. That was going to be one of my questions of just as a speaker that's getting a lot of gigs, and you are not alone. That's a portion of what I do. And it's definitely a very disorienting time, and just how resourceful you are, and that body awareness again of kind of just it's very intuitive, and sometimes
Yes.
it's like it's global right now, but just that slowing down or even completely stopping to listen in.
Yeah.
It is so quiet. And what you're doing now in this moment of kind of podcasting yourself or other podcasts. And it made me think of the Latter Day Lesbian podcast. I met the
Yes. I
yeah,
love
yeah.
Shelly and
Okay, good, good.
Mary.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that you're connected with them because
Oh
they're
yeah.
amazing. And I met them at the podcast movement. I was like, whoa, this is such a good show. And what I love about their show is that, I was raised Catholic. I'm no longer practicing. And just a lot of commonalities of people
Oh
of
yes.
religious backgrounds, and how we as kind of LGBT folks have kind of negotiated our lives as adults of like, wait a second, maybe this isn't working out for us so well. So their show is so good. And just another resource for you and for other folks that now that you're in this kind of book writing proposal, the Publish Your Purpose Press, Jen Grace, also a friend of this show, is doing a 30-day writing challenge in April.
What?
Yeah. So she's online, and I'll make sure you all are connected. And that's
Yes.
shout out to everybody who tunes in. That is a really fabulous resource. Even if maybe you don't have any intentions of writing a book yet, just kind of joining that challenge to have an outlet, support along the way. So she's doing free office hours. If you're, kind of managing the imposter syndrome voices that pop up and others along the way. But she's fantastic. So I'll make sure you all are connected. So resourceful, that you're able to kind of say, okay, I need to figure this out now. It's another wrinkle. And again, I think it's demonstrating, that you're going back to what is your purpose, and really, being wedded to that message, trying to, just by speaking your truth, you're saving lives. And oh man, it's so, I have very deep admiration for what you're doing in the world. I wanted to ask you a few questions just on, we're centered around talking about everything LGBT. And I wanted to ask you about maybe your experiences in the healthcare world, after you had come out. Did you ever have any challenges post, stepping into your truth of being a part of the rainbow family in the workplace? And in particular, if you did, any advice for those folks that are still kind of struggling with showing up more authentically in their own work?
I do. I have a guiding principle that I use in my work of I teach from the scar, not the wound.
Yeah.
So when there is something that I haven't healed yet, I don't really put that out there to my audience, because to me, that's using them as my therapist. And I don't like to do that. I have a great therapist.
Yes.
So I have this story that I apologize if this comes off as not fully healed, because I really am still wrapping my brain around it, although I've been able to release a lot of the angst and bitterness with it. So I reach out to local schools, high schools and junior highs that have speech and debate classes. And I volunteer to go in and talk about the TEDx experience and how that changed life for me, and how I'm now a professional speaker. And right. And that's been so fun. And I love it because it's kind of a backdoor way into standing up for these generations to say, yeah, I am a lesbian and I'm a professional woman and I am happy and I have these great kids and this is possible. Because in our area of Arizona, they don't see that very often, right? Yeah. So far, it had been really well received, and schools were really happy to get that. And then my sister is a teacher, a math teacher at a middle school, and so this was the first middle school actually. And their speech and debate teacher reached out to me. We'd really love to have you come in. This will be great. We're doing a whole unit on TED Talks. And so we must have emailed back and forth 15 times. And it was decided at the end that I would come on Monday and talk to the 7th and 8th graders and issue them a challenge that I would come back on Friday and judge basically these mini talks that they were going to give. And then on Tuesday, I would come back and I would talk to the 5th and 6th graders. So I was going to be there 3 days that week. And I got there Monday. And it was really cool. A group of probably 35 7th and 8th graders who are insane, by the way. I don't know how these teachers do it.
I don't either.
Right. And here I am thinking, I'm a mama of four. I got this. But they were the hardest group I've ever had in public speaking. And so I'm chatting with them. I tell them the story. This is my experience with TEDx. This is how I prepared. This is what happened that day. And this has been the consequences of it, how great it's been. And then the bell rings. They asked some questions about, do you get to travel? They were really interested in that. And then they also asked, one kid raised his hand and said, what's the difference between a lesbian and a dyke? And I was like, that's a great question. Let's talk about that. And actually another girl in the room was like, I'd like to answer that. And she gave her answer to it. And I was like, this is amazing.
Wow.
Like I was so happy with that. Right. And
Yes.
then the bell rang and they left. And this little girl who had been like staring at me intently the whole time, which hardly anyone else did. Right. And she had these big blue eyes. And as she walked towards me, I realized, oh, okay, she's dressed a certain way and her hair is a certain way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she might be on the spectrum somewhere. And as she got closer, I realized her eyes were just filled with tears. Mm-hmm. And she said, and this is the phrase I hear the most often. I want to ask another LGBTQ speaker if they hear this a lot too. She doesn't say hi. She doesn't introduce herself. She just says, can I please have a hug? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I, of course, hug her and hold her, and she's sobbing. And then we kind of break apart, and I look at her, and she says, I came out as a lesbian to my family last year. My mom's been really great, but my dad is really angry, and it's not going well. And I feel like their marriage is on the rocks, and I feel like it's because of me. And I wish I had never said anything. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, honey, right? And so I tell her about, we have this really amazing program for youth here in Phoenix. And I tell her about it, and I make sure she has my email address. And I said, if your mom ever wants to talk, please let her know I'm available, and I'd love to chat with her. And then she walks away because she's got to get to her next class, right? And I'm walking towards the teacher who's at the front of the room with another teacher that she's brought in. And I'm so happy. I'm so happy, right? Because I feel like I made a difference.
Yeah,
like
absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so happy. And I walk up to them and she looks at me and she said, you weren't supposed to talk about your sexuality. Mm. And I'm kind of shocked because that's the entire point of my TED Talk.
Yeah. Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And I'm like, I don't understand. And she said, that was too much. That was too much for them. That was not okay. And I look at her and I say, exactly what was not okay? Mm-hmm. And she said, and she kind of took a step back and she was like, well, you need to know our entire school district does not teach sex ed at all. Mm. And I'm a little shocked. And so she's like, that's who we are. And you need to respect that. So tomorrow when you come back for the 5th and 6th graders, you cannot talk about your sexuality. They are too young. Wow. And I look at her and I say, I have a sixth grader and a third grader. Are you telling me they are too young to know who their mother is?
Mm-hmm.
And she doesn't have an answer for that, of course.
Yes.
She's basically saying, like, I'm just telling you we can't do that here. So I drive home. It takes an hour for me to get home. And I'm thinking the entire time, how am I going to whitewash my presentation to these kids to not include the topic of my TED Talk?
Yeah.
Right. And then I get home, I log onto my computer, and there's an email there from the teacher and the vice principal saying, you did damage today. Do not come back.
Mm. Mm.
And that hit hard.
Yeah.
That hit hard. On a parent level, because it really made me question, like, that was, sorry, I'm going to jump back a little bit. That conversion therapist that I had seen for so long, one of the very first things said to me was, don't ever tell your children. It will destroy them.
Mm.
Children whose parents come out to them, they are completely dysfunctional as adults. I see many of them in my office because they need so much therapy. Don't ever tell your kids. And as I got up and walked away that day, that person stood up, looked me in the eye and said, you need to take this secret to your grave.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first time I thought about suicide, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so now you speed up to here I am living my life now, and I hear this, you did damage. You're not welcome back here with these students.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the very first thing, like the instinctual response is, I'm damaging my girls.
Yeah.
And my two youngest are girls. Like I must be hurting them.
Yeah.
And that took quite a bit of work with my therapist to realize that is not the case, that I am actually setting an incredible example of them as they grow up and realize they can be whoever the hell they want to be.
Yes.
And they can be successful and they can be incredible. And yes, people will try to shut them down and screw that.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Like it took a bit, but I finally got there with that. But then it was also the next level is, that was my very first time, besides the religion. I get hate mail from people in the religion every week. Mm-hmm. And I'm starting to get used to it, and whatever, I'm starting to just blow it off. But to have an entire institution tell me you're not welcome here.
Oh yeah.
That was rough. Yeah. And so far, the only way I've been able to come through that is to think, this is why I'm needed.
Absolutely.
This is why I'm needed.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. It's, I mean, this is a really difficult story to tell. And I really liked what you said about, teaching from the scar, not the wound. And it sounds like you've done a lot of healing on this, because I think it's a really helpful story for a lot of folks around showing up authentically in our work now, not so much of like past, when I worked for this employer and I would never do it in my own business. This is a client of yours, right? And it's like one would assume if they're bringing you in, they watched your TED Talk. And,
and I have a feeling they didn't.
Yeah, I know. It's almost like, sometimes people want to come on the show and I'm like, oh, that's great. Are you LGBT or an ally? And it's like the record scratches. I'm like, the show is called The Out Entrepreneur, so I feel you on that. And, shame on them on many levels, but like do your homework, right? Even in that, right? Like this is a moment of adversity and I mean, you're caught off guard. You're caught, it's for that kind of feedback at the end after it was so clear that young girl who came up to you just to have a hug, you were that possibility model for her of a healthy adult living in your truth, sharing a message that impacted, that entire classroom, right? Including the teacher and teachers, whoever the adults were in the room that were behaving badly, right?
Right.
And it's just that those kind of moments where you're talking about your life and an aspect of who you are that is not sex education. That is who you are. That's your identity, you know? And I'm just, it's
Yeah.
so basic. And
Yeah.
for young kids too, I mean, at the age of 5, that's, you know, in terms of childhood, adolescent development, that's when you have your first crush, you know? So, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and that may be for someone of the same sex or the opposite sex or
Mm-hmm.
many different genders, you know,
An
just,
anime character.
oh my gosh, an anime. Yeah, I know. Like, I'm not a parent, so I'm like, you know, whatever
They are
media is
so
out
into
there,
that right
right?
now.
Totally. But just like that's the kind of that basic education of like how our identities form in, you know, in the mix of all of the other things that are happening for child adolescent development. And I'm feeling it for you. But I guess like, you know, the flip, you know, is like on the empowerment side, if we're talking about, you know, our lived experiences and our superpowers, that
Mm,
superpower that I just see so clearly is you are that possibility model. You are, every time you take the stage, your message is absolutely positively impacting people. And for people that are offended by it, or you know, they just like grabbing my sweater, like clutching your sweater or pearls or whatever you're wearing around your neck. You know, it's like, you know, like it's impacting them too of like, open up your worldview, you know, like not everyone's exactly like you. And that's what makes the world pretty interesting in my opinion. But okay, so I'm getting off my soapbox, and you know, I know that our time is winding down, and I love just listening to you. So it's clear how effective
mm,
you are as a speaker, and I hope you get your book out soon, because I would love to bring you back on the show and we can talk about it. I would, you know, because I mean, you're inspiring me. For those folks that are listening, they are still trying to align their purpose with their work, and they're thinking about
mm,
getting started as a business owner. You know, what kind of
mhm,
advice would you give them based on your own experiences? And, you know, as you look back, you know, what would you do the same? What might you do different
mhm,
that could really, you know, get some more inspiration out there for future LGBT business owners?
mhm. Absolutely. Okay, so starting at the beginning, I gained some amazing skills as a portrait photographer. Like, yes, there's photography, but that's how I learned to really work the social media. That's how I learned to really work blogs. And blogs, some people feel like they've gone the way of the dinosaur, but they actually haven't when you look at it in the framework of SEO, right? Search engine optimization. Like, if you know how to write a blog post that is like SEO awesome, you are going to get clients and you are going to get traffic. And not only are they just clients, they are like clients who are warmed up, primed, ready to go. So I feel it, and I also learned really how to work a network of clients, because everyone knows the most effective marketing is word of mouth. And so when you know how to work your network of clients to use their word of mouth, you know, so many people have a social marketing strategy. Do you have a word of mouth strategy? Like, that is one of the most efficient, effective, and cost effective ways to make sure that your business is a success. So that's all I learned from this previous career, that I was able to bring. Like, people could say like portrait photography and public speaker, like how do those relate in any way, shape, or form? But I was able to bring all of this knowledge and resources that I gained during that time of my life and apply it to this new career. But I would say I floundered for the first year because I couldn't figure out what offer am I putting out there? What am I asking people to pay for? It took a long time for me to realize I am a good public speaker. I am not a good one-on-one coach. And maybe if I am a good one-on-one coach, I just don't enjoy it that much.
Yeah.
So I do not consider myself a coach, especially because I have I don't know, a fear, because I have firsthand experienced a really horrible therapist who is not licensed, because you cannot be licensed if you're practicing conversion therapy. And I in no way wanted to approach the idea of I'm a coach, I'm a counselor, I'm a therapist. Like, I am not trained for that. and,
Yeah.
and I don't want to screw anyone up. So, but that was the vibe of the moment of the last 2 or 3 years, was if you have some kind of specialty and you want to help people, become a coach.
Hmm.
Well, to me, that was not an option. So I needed to figure out what is the offer that I'm going to put out there that people can buy. And so I wish I had been able to narrow that down a lot sooner. And I think the biggest roadblock to that was just not believing that I had something of value to offer. To me, it was just a story. It was just my life story. Everyone has a life story. Why would that be something valuable? It took like a solid year for me to recognize the value in that, to recognize that people need it, that our world needs it. There's a reason I experienced it, and now it's time to get it out there. So I think that would probably be the biggest thing that I would recommend, but also just really recognizing the talent and resources that you already have.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to jump in. I think that is so, the advice that you're sharing is so valuable, because it's looking at, all of the training, whatever kind of professional skills you already bring to the table, getting clear on that purpose, that why, something that lights you up. And I love what you're saying just about the lived experiences. There's a reason why you experienced it, and now it's time to share it, provided you've done that healing work, like you said,
Right.
teaching from the scar, not the wound. And I think if you package just all of that up, I think you get a lot of folks kind of coming to you to say, hey, wait, we would like to be coached by you. But I also think that advice too, of knowing, where your superpowers are, what you're good at, and what could get you in trouble if you don't have kind of that professional expertise, such as a credential, right?
Absolutely.
That could help support what you want to do in terms of helping folks. So, oh my gosh, this was such a good interview, and I would love to bring you back on the show when you get your book done. So there's motivation there. So for folks who want to see your TED Talk, if they haven't seen it, if they want to learn more about your work, where's the best place to find you online?
So my website is kind of the hub for all things. It's elenajoyexperience.com.
I love that. So we will include your website in the show notes. And Elena, I want to thank you again for spending some time, considering everything going on in the world. I'm excited to listen to this again. I need that kind of inspiration right now. And I hope for folks who tuned in that this was also a bright spot on your calendar for the week. And if you want more of these interviews, every Tuesday, we're going to continue bringing them out. And every Friday at 2:30 p.m. Pacific, we're just going to have office hours, a lounge where we can talk about all things business. We can talk about the magic of being a part of the Rainbow family and everything that comes along with both of those fun aspects of who we are. So again, that's 2:30 p.m. every Friday. And for now, please take good care of yourselves, continue to be a bright light during these times, and continue being your authentic selves 100% of the time.